The case that thought it was over reveals a shocking secret: the girl on the highway. Hello, everyone. Today brings yet another tragic case, but this time the chef has prepared an unusual spice for you. The result itself will shock you to the core, and the heat of this case will only intensify once everything is revealed. Consider it a challenge. Keep asking yourself what the motive behind this crime could be. Now let's begin. The story begins on the night of July 5th, 2007. Around midnight, under a bright full moon, a truck driver named Everett Dingens was traveling on Highway 165 near Phoenix, Alabama. When he turned on his high beams, he noticed a young woman lying face down near the roadside, apparently without pants. With the darkness surrounding him, everything seemed hazy, and Everett sensed something was terribly wrong. Cautiously, he approached the scene and immediately called the police. Investigators arrived within minutes, and upon examining the victim, they concluded that this was the work of a vicious killer. Though there were no signs of beating on her body, 6 gunshot wounds were found, including 2 on her head, clearly indicating an intent to leave her no chance of survival. Unfortunately, besides the 6 9mm shell casings at the scene, there was little evidence, and they couldn't even identify the victim. As for the motive, investigators initially suspected it might have been a sexual assault, given that her upper body was untouched, but her underwear had been pulled down to her thighs. At first, they held on to the hope of finding biological evidence on her body, but that hope was dashed. Forensic examination revealed no trace of assault or sexual violence. This left investigators puzzled. What could explain her disheveled clothing? Fortunately, the investigation wasn't entirely in vain. Fingerprint and DNA analysis eventually led to her identification. The victim was Shay Graham, a 20-year-old college student. Her identification sent shockwaves through the local community because Shay's family was somewhat prominent in Phoenix. She had grown up in an affluent household. Her father, Kevin, and mother, Lisa, high school sweethearts, had been married for over 30 years. The family owned a successful real estate company, and Kevin was well regarded in the area. Shay herself was studying accounting, preparing to take over the family business after graduation. However, Shay's notoriety didn't come from her family's reputation. Despite her academic achievements, she led a rather turbulent life. She often mingled with questionable crowds, and sometimes even got into trouble with them. It was common to see her in the headlines, as her lifestyle sparked disapproval in the community. People couldn't ignore the fact that someone of her social standing frequently associated with unsavory types, and her celebrity status only grew. The search for the truth. Some might argue that Shay's troubles were likely tied to the crowd she hung around. This was also the police's initial thought, so the investigators went to her parents first, asking if she had any conflicts with these people. However, her parents insisted that she had not mentioned any issues. Since graduating high school, Shay had reportedly distanced herself from those friends. If they had to name a suspect, though, her parents immediately thought of one person: her ex-boyfriend, Larry. Why Larry? It was simple. He had been a bad influence, leading Shay into all kinds of trouble. Larry even had a criminal record, including a charge for breaking and entering. Her parents had always disapproved, using every tactic they could think of to separate them, and eventually, the couple broke up. Kevin and Lisa now wondered if Larry might be holding a grudge against Shay due to their intervention. Additionally, Shay had a new boyfriend, which could have provoked Larry's jealousy. The police found these suspicions reasonable and brought Larry in for questioning. Surprisingly, he cooperated fully, recounting his version of events without any resistance. He confirmed that they had broken up due to family pressure, though there had been no lingering animosity between them. They had even maintained some level of communication afterward. Based on his statements and an initial examination, Larry had an alibi, though the investigation revealed he had placed a call to Shay the night of the murder. close to the time she was killed. Larry was forthright, admitting that he had indeed called Shay that evening. He explained that he had wanted to check on her before her upcoming court appearance on July 6th, where she would be standing trial in another case. However, Shay's mother, Lisa, had answered the phone and told him that Shay was with her new boyfriend, Glenn, at that time. Larry had quietly ended the call after that, and there was nothing unusual about it on the surface. Yet, considering the timing, Shay died on July 5th, just one day before her court appearance. The police noted two significant details. First, the nature of the case Shay was involved in was still unknown. Second, Lisa had mentioned Shay was with her boyfriend right before the murder, making these two people, the new boyfriend and Shay herself, the last individuals confirmed to have been in contact with the victim. Given this, the police decided to look further into Shay's upcoming court case on July 6th. A year earlier, Shay and her friends had gone out drinking, and the night took an unexpected turn. One of her friends pulled a gun from his car and began playing with it. The weapon accidentally discharged, though fortunately no one was hit. However, this was in a busy area, and someone reported it to the police. The authorities arrived to find a group of intoxicated young people and, unable to determine who had fired the shot, took everyone in for questioning. Now Shay and her friends were facing charges, with the hearing scheduled for the next day. Although the date of the incident and the trial were only a day apart, Shay's father believed it was just an unfortunate accident. Moreover, no one had been hurt, and Shay wasn't even the one holding the gun. Normally, the whole group would have been detained before the trial, but Shay's family was financially well off. To save his daughter from a jail sentence, her father paid a considerable sum to the witnesses, asking them to speak favorably about Shay in court. The total came to about $100,000, allowing her to post bail. A new turn. With all indications pointing to no personal grudges against Shay, the police were forced to shift their investigation towards her best friend, Ami, and her boyfriend, Glenn. Shay's parents confirmed that on the night of the murder, she had said she was meeting up with friends, specifically Ami and Glenn. Yet, when questioned, their statements raised suspicions. Although their accounts were nearly identical, which could be explained by them being together that night, the way they described parting ways felt odd. According to Ami and Glenn, they were just wandering the streets when Shay suddenly mentioned she had plans to meet someone. She asked Glenn to drop her off at a supermarket near a gas station. Shortly after, a black car pulled into the station. Shay nodded at the driver and got into the front seat, and seeing her leave, Glenn and Ami left as well. However, something seemed off. Glenn, Shay's boyfriend, didn't show any concern about her leaving with a stranger so late at night, which puzzled the police. When they pressed him on who picked Shay up, he admitted he had no idea. In response, Ami asserted that everything she had said was true. But since she was sitting in Glenn's car, she couldn't see who was in the other vehicle. However, given what she knew about Shay, she speculated that the person who picked her up was likely Kenny Walton. Who was Kenny? Kenny used to work in construction but lost his job after an accident where he collided with a truck. Later, by sheer luck, he landed a job with Shay's family's construction firm. With his prior experience, he took his work very seriously and earned the trust of Kevin and Lisa, Shay's parents. They eventually promoted him to assistant and house manager. Over time, Kenny became like family, as he'd been around for over 10 years and spent considerable time with Shay. In fact, he had nearly as much interaction with her as her own father. Kenny confirmed that he had picked Shay up at the gas station on the night of July 5th. This meant that Shay's friends hadn't lied. But this raised a new question. Why would Shay keep her meeting with Kenny secret, even from her boyfriend? According to Kenny, Shay called him around 10 p.m., saying she needed to discuss something important and requested to meet him at the gas station. Given Shay's urgency, Kenny didn't refuse. But when they met, Shay surprised him by asking for a car. The day after the shooting incident, July 6th, she was due in court. Shay dreaded standing trial and feared the court's decision, so she intended to escape. Her urgent need for the car was part of her plan to flee that night. Now it's clear why she kept this from everyone. Kenny insisted that he tried to dissuade her, believing running away wouldn't solve the problem. Despite her pleas, he stood firm and refused. Shay got out of the car and walked away, while Kenny left the gas station, uncertain about what had happened to her after that. To verify Kenny's statement, the police checked with Shay's parents. Kevin and Lisa both vouched for Kenny, affirming that he was practically family. Given their frequent late work hours, they often entrusted him with Shay's safety. If he'd meant her harm, they reasoned, he would have acted long before. The call records showed that Shay had indeed phoned Kenny around 10 p.m. on the night of the incident, supporting his account. Unexpected evidence. But the police found a surprising turn of events when they reviewed security footage. The camera captured Shay getting into Kenny's car, which then drove away. Contrary to Kenny's initial statement, Shay hadn't exited the car at all. When summoned a second time to explain this contradiction, Kenny sighed, admitting he hadn't been entirely truthful. While most of his story was accurate, he confessed that he'd actually agreed to help Shay find a car for her escape, despite his reservations. Throughout the drive, he tried to persuade her to abandon her plan. His attempts to dissuade her only provoked her further. At a red light, Shay suddenly opened the car door, got out, and walked away. With the car stopped in the middle of the street, Kenny couldn't follow her. By the time he found a place to park and went back, Shay had disappeared, so he went home alone. Kenny initially lied for two reasons. First, aiding a fugitive could lead to legal trouble. Second, while he wasn't directly responsible for Shay's death, he felt that leaving her alone might have led to the tragedy. If Kevin learned his daughter died because he abandoned her, he could even lose his job. After hearing his explanation, the police deliberated, sensing that Kenny's story was both plausible and carefully worded, yet too flawless. They decided to bring in an interrogation specialist, suspecting Kenny had prepared his story well. The results of this new interrogation would prove vital in uncovering the truth. Kenny recounted the events once more, but this time there was a twist. Shay's reason remained the same, to escape by finding a getaway car. Yet in this version, as they were on their way, Shay suddenly asked to stop as she needed to use the restroom. With no facilities in sight, she stepped away from the car to take care of business nearby. But Shay couldn't have known that the man who had protected her all her life would suddenly pull out a gun and without hesitation fire 6 shots. Afterward, Kenny sped away from the scene. This revelation shocked everyone present. It may be hard to believe, but Kenny's motive for killing her boiled down to a personal vendetta, a contracted hit. According to Kenny, the person behind this heinous act was none other than Shay's own mother, Lisa Graham. He claimed Lisa had repeatedly urged him to get rid of Shay because her daughter was out of control, constantly causing trouble and bringing shame to the Graham family. Her frustration had reached a boiling point after the recent incident involving Shay's friends and the firearm. Lisa felt Kevin had spent far too much money covering up for their daughter's behavior, and when Shay still wanted to flee, she finally decided she'd had enough. According to Kenny, on the morning of July 5, 2007, Lisa met him privately at the library, telling him to find a way to eliminate Shay. She offered no specific reward, only implying that once the deed was done, he could ask for anything he wanted. Kenny was still pondering how to carry out the task when Shay presented him with the perfect opportunity that same night. The rest, as we know, ended in tragedy. Kenny's statement deeply disturbed the police, but they needed proof to link Lisa to the crime. When they asked for evidence, Kenny claimed that the murder weapon, a 9mm pistol, was provided by Lisa. He stated that on July 6, 2007, the day after the murder, he returned the gun to her. Acting on this lead, investigators obtained a search warrant and went to the Graham residence. They found nothing suspicious at first, but luckily, Kevin mentioned that they did indeed own a 9mm gun, which his wife frequently used. With this information, the police searched Lisa's father's home, and there, they found the gun they needed. Ballistics confirmed it was the weapon used to kill Shay Graham. Despite this evidence, Kevin struggled to believe that his wife would kill their daughter. A neighbor later disclosed that during a conversation, Lisa had confided her frustration about constantly paying legal fees for her daughter and even hinted that she'd be willing to pay $50,000 if someone would take care of Shay. At the time, the neighbor dismissed it as a joke, but after the crime, those words took on a chilling reality. With both witness testimony and physical evidence secured, Lisa eventually confessed to her role in the murder. However, her trial was delayed until 2012, a full 4 years after the crime. As we can see, Lisa, a mother frustrated over the continual costs of her daughter's mistakes, ultimately harbored a deadly resentment. While her family was financially stable, her anger seemed to have no limits. Her defense argued that her mental state warranted examination, leading to further delays. Psychological evaluations showed that she had no mental illness or cognitive impairment affecting her judgment. However, her IQ was only 77, which experts said could lead someone to act without fully considering the consequences. They noted that people with this level of intelligence often struggle with relationships, even with loved ones, which might explain her actions. On June 14, 2012, Kenny was convicted of conspiracy in Shay Graham's murder and sentenced to life in prison. Lisa's trial was originally set for August of that year, but it was postponed due to the judge's illness. Unfortunately, the judge's condition worsened, and he passed away in early 2014, delaying the case until November 2015. Finally, the jury rejected the defense's argument about her low IQ, sentencing Lisa to death. She filed appeals in 2019 and 2020, but both were denied, and she is currently awaiting her execution. The grim nature of this case raises many questions. Could low intelligence alone drive a mother to kill her daughter, or was it simply frustration taken to an unthinkable extreme? For added perspective, I found a report in Montgomery Real-Time, which included details that shed light on Lisa's motives. The report describes Shay's rebellious behavior, noting that despite her privileged background, she frequented questionable clubs and often danced provocatively, which led to her frequent run-ins with the law. Lisa reportedly felt deeply humiliated by her daughter's conduct, and more disturbingly, she also believed that Shay may have had an improper relationship with her own husband. While these new details provide some insight, their authenticity still requires verification, so they're shared here as additional context. This concludes our coverage of this tragic case. As the saying goes, even a wild tiger doesn't harm its own cubs. So was Lisa driven by helplessness or just a cold desire to be rid of the inconvenience? Either way, this story has delivered twist after twist. If you have any questions or comments about the case, please let us know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest videos, which help our channel continue to grow. Thanks for watching, and until next time.